The most destructive force in your life is not hatred. It is not betrayal. It is not even the narcissist you finally walked away from. It is something far more invisible, far more corrosive, and far more specifically targeted at exactly the kind of person you are. It is jealous energy. And what the greatest minds in depth psychology discovered about how it operates will permanently change the way you protect yourself. Not just today, not just in this relationship, but for the rest of your life. Most people think jealousy is about wanting what someone else has, a simpler emotion, a surface-level desire that belongs entirely to the person feeling it and has limited power over anyone outside them. That understanding is dangerously incomplete. The research is unambiguous and the implications are deeply personal. Jealousy is not a simple emotion. It is a projection of the unlived life, the unacknowledged potential, the abandoned version of a self that someone chose not to develop and cannot comfortably confront. And nowhere does that projection land harder, with more precision and more lasting damage, than on the empath. Here's what nobody tells you about jealous energy. And once you understand this, once the mechanism is visible, you will never be caught off guard by it again. Every person carries within their unconscious the parts of themselves they refuse to acknowledge, the dreams they abandoned, the depth they were afraid to develop, the sensitivity they were taught to suppress, the authentic self they traded for something safer and more socially acceptable. These rejected parts do not disappear. They live in the shadow, the unconscious repository of everything the person could not integrate. And they wait. And when they encounter someone who is living what they abandoned, someone who is developing the depth they suppressed, expressing the sensitivity they buried, inhabiting the authentic self they traded away, something activates in them that they cannot name and cannot control. They are not seeing you. They are seeing their own abandoned potential reflected back at them. And that reflection fills them with a rage that has no honest address. So it finds one, you, and here is where it becomes specifically, urgently dangerous for the person you are. Your sensitivity, the very gift that makes you extraordinary, is also what makes you uniquely vulnerable to this specific force. Your boundaries between self and other are naturally thinner than most people's. This is what makes you remarkable at reading people, sensing emotional shifts, perceiving what others cannot articulate. But that same permeability means jealous energy does not simply bounce off you the way it might bounce off someone with less depth and less receptivity. It seeps in. It disguises itself as self-doubt. It whispers that maybe you are too much, too sensitive, too visible, too present, too everything that you actually are and you because you feel everything so completely. Begin, almost without noticing, to believe it. You start shrinking, dimming, apologizing for the light that someone else's darkness cannot tolerate. That ends today. Here is what is actually happening when jealous energy enters your system, and why it has been able to cause the specific damage it has caused without you being able to fully identify its source. When an empath absorbs jealous energy without recognizing what it is, without identifying its origin, its nature, and its true target, something devastating occurs at a level below conscious awareness. They begin to carry someone else's shadow as though it were their own. They feel guilty for their gifts, ashamed of their depth, wrong for simply being who they are. Not because something is wrong with them, but because someone else's unresolved wound has been projected onto them with such consistency and such precision that it eventually begins to feel like their own interior experience, rather than something that was placed there from outside. None of that guilt belongs to you. None of the shame, none of the shrinking. It was never yours, it was theirs. Placed in you, not always consciously, not always with deliberate intent, by someone who could not tolerate what your existence reflected about their own choices. This phenomenon, the unconscious merging of one person's unresolved interior with another's, happens almost automatically for the empath. Because the same openness that makes you a gifted healer, a genuine witness, an extraordinary source of understanding for the people you love, makes you permeable in ways that jealous energy exploits with devastating efficiency. And here's the shocking truth that changes the entire dynamic once it is fully understood. Jealous energy does not target the weak. It does not land on people who pose no threat to the jealous person's self-concept. It specifically, precisely, and almost exclusively targets people who are living, or beginning to live, the potential that the jealous person abandoned. Your gifts are not the problem. Your visibility is not the problem. Your depth, your sensitivity, your genuine presence in the world is not the problem. You are being targeted because of your light, not despite it. The person whose energy is landing in you as self-doubt, as the whisper that you should be less, is not responding to a flaw in you. They are responding to the confrontation your existence creates with their own unlived life. Your healing reminds them of their avoidance. Your authenticity exposes their performance. Your courage to be fully what you are holds up a mirror to everything they chose not to become, and rather than face that mirror directly, which would require the courage they have not yet found, they redirect the discomfort outward, onto you, in the form of energy that enters your system and reorganizes itself as your own doubt. This is the mechanism. This is what has been happening without your full conscious awareness in every relationship where your growth was met with subtle resistance, where your visibility produced inexplicable tension, where being more fully yourself seemed to make certain people in your life less comfortable rather than more. Now you see it. And seen clearly, it can no longer operate the way it did in the dark. Here is where the understanding becomes protection, and where protection becomes permanent. The first element of the lifetime shield is what the deepest psychological research calls conscious differentiation. The developed, practiced, increasingly automatic ability to distinguish between what is genuinely yours and what has been projected onto you by someone else's unresolved interior. Most people never develop this skill. They walk through their entire lives absorbing emotional debris from every environment they pass through, without ever pausing to question whether what they are feeling originated in them or arrived from outside. For the empath, whose permeability makes this absorption constant and comprehensive, the absence of this skill is not a minor gap. It is the specific vulnerability through which the most damage enters. Conscious differentiation begins with a single, deceptively simple practice. When you feel the arrival of self-doubt, the whisper that you are too much, the sudden deflation that follows contact with certain people, the specific heaviness that settles after interactions that should have felt neutral, you pause before accepting it as your own. You ask, where did this come from? Was this present before this interaction, or did it arrive during it? Does this feeling belong to my honest assessment of myself, or does it carry the texture of something that was placed here from outside? That question, asked consistently, with genuine attention to its answer, begins to develop the perceptual muscle of differentiation. And as that muscle develops, something extraordinary happens. The projected energy loses its landing strip. Here is the mechanism of the shield that makes it so specifically effective against jealous energy in particular. Jealous projection operates in unconsciousness. It requires the target to remain unaware of what is happening, to internalize the projection without questioning its origin, to accept the self-doubt as self-generated, to carry the shadow as though it were native to them. The entire mechanism depends on your unconsciousness of it. The moment you become genuinely, specifically, practically aware of the mechanism, the moment you can feel the projected energy arriving and name it for what it is, the dynamic collapses. Not through confrontation, not through retaliation or boundary setting or any external action. Simply through the withdrawal of unconscious acceptance. When you stop receiving someone else's shadow as your truth, their projection has nowhere to land. It returns to its source. And that return, that simple, non-aggressive, entirely internal act of refusing to carry what was never yours, begins something in the projector that your continued absorption was successfully preventing. They are suddenly face to face with their own shadow, their own unlived potential, their own choices, and without your system available as a container for the discomfort of that confrontation, they must begin for the first time to face it directly. That is not your responsibility. That is the natural consequence of a shield working exactly as it was designed to work. The shield has a layer beneath the practice of differentiation, and it is the layer that makes the protection not just effective but permanent, not just defensive but generative, not just a practice you maintain but a state you inhabit. It is called individuation, and it is the most powerful psychological protection ever identified for the specific vulnerability of the empath to external projection. Individuation is the process of becoming so completely, so thoroughly, so authentically yourself, integrating every dimension of your character, owning every aspect of your depth, inhabiting every part of your genuine nature without apology, and without the performance of a more acceptable version. That external projections simply cannot find the crack of unresolved self-doubt they require as their point of entry. Here is why this is the most powerful element of the shield. Every other form of protection is reactive. Walls keep things out but also keep you in. Avoidance limits your life in proportion to its effectiveness. Suppression of what you feel costs you more energy than what you were trying to avoid. These strategies work, partially, temporarily, at significant personal cost, by creating distance between you and the threat. Individuation works differently. It does not create distance, it creates wholeness. And wholeness, genuine, inhabited, unperformed wholeness, is the one condition that jealous projection cannot penetrate. Not because it is aggressive, not because it is defended, but because it is complete. Here is the truth at the center of this that needs to land with its full weight. Jealous energy can only wound those who secretly doubt their own worth. That is not an encouragement to simply feel better about yourself. It is a precise psychological observation about the mechanism of projection. Projected doubt can only attach to existing doubt. It requires an interior crack, an unresolved question about your own legitimacy, your own value, your own right to be fully what you are, to enter through. The individuated empath has done the interior work of closing those cracks, not by pretending that doubt never existed, but by examining it honestly, understanding its origins, integrating the parts of themselves that were previously hidden or suppressed, and arriving at a relationship with their own worth that is built from genuine self-knowledge rather than borrowed from external validation. And from that place, from the groundedness of someone who knows themselves completely enough to stop questioning their own legitimacy, jealous energy becomes what it actually is when perceived clearly: noise, present but powerless, washing over the surface of a wholeness it cannot touch. Here is what makes this shield genuinely last a lifetime, rather than requiring constant maintenance. Unlike walls, it does not erode. Unlike avoidance, it does not demand that you limit your life. Unlike suppression, it does not exhaust you. The shield of individuation grows stronger with every encounter. Every time you recognize a projection and choose not to absorb it, the shield deepens. Every time you witness jealous energy without making it about your worth, the shield expands. Every time you refuse to shrink in the presence of someone else's unresolved envy, the shield becomes more permanent. You are not fighting jealous energy. You are outgrowing the need to receive it. Not armor, not avoidance, not retaliation. The simple, radical, unstoppable act of becoming entirely, unapologetically, irreversibly yourself. Here is where the understanding becomes a practice, and where the practice becomes the permanent shift that changes everything. Everything in this script has pointed toward one moment. This one, the moment where the mechanism is fully visible, the shield is fully understood, and the only remaining question is whether you will do the specific, daily, non-negotiable work of building it. Because a shield that exists as understanding, but not as practice, is not a shield. It is an idea about a shield. And ideas about protection have never once protected anyone. So here is what changes starting now. The next time you feel the arrival of self-doubt following contact with a specific person, the next time you notice the specific deflation, the specific questioning of your worth, the specific whisper that you should be less visible or less certain or less fully what you are, do not accept it automatically. Do not fold it immediately into your self-concept as though it originated there. Pause. Ask the question, is this mine? Does this carry the texture of genuine self-reflection, or does it carry the weight of something that arrived from outside me? That pause, that single, practiced, consistently applied moment of conscious questioning, is the beginning of the differentiation that the shield requires. It is not dramatic. It is not confrontational. It produces no visible change in the external dynamic. But internally, at the level where the actual damage has always occurred, it changes everything. and then go deeper.